for me, it's about knowing that the authors that I have read and their published works, and it's about asking avid readers basically what makes them tick, what makes them like well-rounded human beings, and just to get the word out, because there's this whole big everything with the book bans. We are in the 21st century, and it's hard to believe that we're still dealing with people who just wish to shut down all types of diversity when it comes to published works, which to me is wrong. And the more that we share, the more that we get to know one another, I think the better off that will be. That's
Okay.
that's how I see it. And and I was actually going back over a journal of mine from yesterday, because The Dance of the Dolphin was the first book of yours that I did read, and I was looking at the date, and it says January 16th of 2006, which was
Mm.
about almost 2 years before I had my adult mitzvah in December of 2007. So yeah. And I was
Nice.
thinking about it. I was thinking about it going, you know what? Let me see if I can reach out and just see if you would be interested. So here we are.
Okay. All right. Well, my two latest books might be of interest to you. I think you had mentioned Omer,
Yeah,
which
that's the
is,
one. Yeah, that's the one that I haven't read yet, but I read your latest one, Amen.
oh, okay. You've seen them in.
Yes. And
Perfect.
that one seemed to be more of a collection. That seemed to be more of like an exploration of prayers through your own poetry, which I found was really interesting.
And
So,
Omer is the 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, where you can count each day. We're commanded as Jews to count the days between Passover and the holiday of Shavuot every single day. So today is day one, today is day two, and then you would go, today is week one, day three, et cetera, 7 weeks, 49 days. There are lots of traditions around it, but the book that I wrote is a mixture of my own writing and an eclectic collection of other writers to enable a person to have a practice during the days of the Omer where they can sit and contemplate and consider the importance of everyday living.
I know that you got a chance. I know because I sent out. I was just going to say I sent out the questionnaire and my current book list at the time to you sometime way in October, and I'm not sure if those ever came across. And then Leslie asked me to send it out again, so I wasn't sure if you had a chance to look over the questionnaire. Did you get a
I
chance to look
saw the
over?
questionnaire somewhat. Yes, I have it here. The book
Okay.
list, I also, sorry.
So why don't we, that's all right. So why don't we get started? So of your
Okay.
of your list, what would be the top 10 or whichever number that you can of books that have influenced your life and in your profession, whether it's something of personal narratives or stories that have left a lasting impression on you, and why?
So as I was looking over my bookshelf, I recognized that of the over 1,000 volumes that I have can be divided into categories. Certainly, fiction is part of it, but it's the smaller shelf of the collection. I read a lot of poetry. I feel that poetry has the ability to turn a phrase and uplift the spirit and explain things that the rational mind can't always explain, that presents life in its most complex state, where things are ironic and paradoxical and not as they seem, and allegorical and metaphorical. And the poet knows how to turn that phrase and use an economy of words to get straight to the point of what is the essence of the human condition. So I read a lot of poetry. I also read a lot of ancient texts, some of the early century church fathers, some of the early century Persian poets. There's a great book, we'll go into specifics in a minute, about writing
Mhm.
from the early centuries. And I really do like some of the ancient texts. I like philosophers or thought leaders like Emerson
Yes.
um, and I read a lot of that kind of stuff as well. Even people like Henry Nouwen in his books on discernment, who's a priest, people who thoughtfully can try to categorize and understand life. Viktor Frankl's A Man in Search of Meaning. And I also read a lot of business books. I really like business books, particularly books that have to do with leadership.
Mm.
I'm very interested in what creates a leader, how leaders can inspire other people to be the best and do the best that they can. And so when you look at the different categories of books that I read, I think that what the common theme is, very good writing. I like superb writing, works that can talk to the human condition, works that can inspire us be the best that we can be.
I concur with that. Definitely. So of those, what would you say would be like the ones that like right off the bat? So you mentioned Emerson, you mentioned, I'm sorry, who was this person? Henry Nouwen?
So yeah, so he's written quite a bit. I know it's backwards, but he's written quite a bit. He is he was a priest, and a lot of his work deals with discernment. Discernment is a whole principle, if the human spirit, and how do we access um, the parts about us that are yearning really to be the best that we can be. And so a lot of the things there's another book called Callings that I also like, Greg Lavoie. It's not a new book, but it also deals with, are we called to become who we are? So the philosophy behind these two books is that there's an aspect to the human condition. So we're rational. We know that we think.
Yeah,
We learn to get the A in school. We
right.
learn to be a good student. A connects B connects C. We're psychological beings. We live in guilt and in fear and in anxiety and in anguish. And, Freud and those after him gave vocabulary around the psychological aspects of the human condition. We're also physical. We walk through this world. We're beings that actually have a physical embodiment, but we're also spiritual. So what is that? How do we touch this? And my work, my reading and my writing deals with the human spirit. So these writers, for instance, Greg Lavoie, who wrote Callings, he writes that the acorn has within it all the information it needs to become an oak tree.
Yes. Yeah, because you mentioned I think you delve into that in Dance of the Dolphin. I think you repeat that same thing with the acorn on that one.
And
It's a good one.
that was so impressionable to me. So if we're born with all the information that we need to have, there's also a great that corresponds to that Jewish myth story that says, why do we have this indentation between our nose and our upper lip?
Yes.
Because when we are born, we're born with knowing everything that we need to know. And the angel comes and touches us right above the lip, and we forget. And the rest of our life is a remembering, a
Hmm.
putting back the pieces of learning what it is that we need to know.
Yeah. And isn't that supposed to be, isn't that also known as Elijah's kiss or something?
Right. So some people say it's Elijah the prophet. Some people say it's an angel. So what has in commons with Greg Lavoie's book on, that he talks about callings, that we're all called into this world to become who we are,
Hmm.
and that Jewish story about the angel teaching us that our whole life is about remembering, or even Henry Nouwen's book on discernment. How do we discern and get in touch with the essence of who we are and who we were always supposed to be? What those three very diverse sources have to say. How is the journey to find out our place in the world.
Okay. So, but that is interesting about the journey, because it also goes back to, I guess it's like a type of Japanese philosophy that it's not the end result, but it's the steps to it. It's each of those little cornerstones, the milestones. It's the steps to that end that make it, what's the word? That make it, that gives it more meaning, I guess, in like a way.
Yes. And even to paraphrase E. E. Cummings, who says it takes time to grow up and be the person we were always meant to be.
Yes.
So all of these writers and thinkers and philosophers have that thought that, if we could only somehow have this practice where we can be in touch with the spiritual aspect of our being, then we can understand the meaning of our life and the purpose of our life.
Yeah, because you mentioned something about reading business books. That's one of the things that because my dad, he was an accountant, and then he's a CPA, and now he's like more of an auditor. But he says the one thing that's missing when it comes to good business leadership is the ethics. That's what seems to be a lot of debate now, is where are the ethics when it comes to good business leadership? Where is that? So if you were to look back at your business books, which one would you say has like the commonality, or like one that has like a good core of when it comes to business ethics?
There are two sources. One is an ancient source from the Talmud, which was codified in the early centuries, around the 5th century. And in the Talmud, which is Jewish wisdom literature, they pose a question. So the rabbis always pose a question. They're much more interested in the questions than they are the answers. So they pose a question. They say, when you die, you should live 120 years and you go up to heaven. What are the questions that you're going to be asked? And the answer, you're going to be asked 6 questions. And the first question you're going to be asked is not how much charity did you give, and not how much studying did you do, or did you follow the commandments. The first question you're going to be asked is, were you honest in business? Were you honest in business? And this very pragmatic answer that cuts, as you said, to the ethics of business dealings.
Yeah.
Makes us understand that the entire fabric of society depends on an ethical agreement among the participants, not to move the decimal point slightly to your advantage, not to put your finger on the scale when you're measuring out grain, but rather a word is your word and a dollar is a dollar, and honesty in business is crucial for a high-functioning society. Years ago, the partner of Covey, Stephen Covey, who everybody knows about, is named Blaine Lee. So Blaine Lee, who's not as in the popular literature as Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, but Blaine Lee, who his partner, writes a book called The Power Principle. And the Power Principle says basically this: when you're a leader, there are 3 reasons why people do what you say. One is because they're afraid of you. They're afraid they're going to lose their job, or afraid of retribution. And so they do what you say. The other is out of mutual benefit. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You do this, I'll do that, in exchange of favors.
Yeah.
And the third is because they honor you. And the reason why they honor you is because you honor them.
Mm.
And the highest form of leadership is based on the honor principle, that you create a dynamic and a culture in a business setting, which depends on honor. I hear you, I see you, I understand you, I respect you. I honor your humanity and your personhood, and not just your contribution to the bottom line. And if I approach you with honor, then almost quite naturally, you're going to reciprocate and approach me with honor. And therefore, I lead as a leader, not because you're afraid of me or not because of what you can get from me, but because I've elevated our way of being in this world to the honor principle.
That's one thing that we've seen a lot as of, well, what we got in 2016, around the same time that I was hired as a full-time educator back then. There was, I don't know, honor and honesty went out the door, and we're trying to somehow progressively get that back. So that is definitely, but that's interesting though, because a lot of students that were taking, I guess they were taking like the college prep courses. When you said, I didn't know the author, I never heard of Stephen Covey, but I did hear the title, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. My students were reading that.
Yeah,
They definitely
that's his
were.
partner.
So we have those. Were there any others that stand out to you from the list that are like, that you would highly, that are your personal favorites? I know you mentioned poetry, so you have E. Cummings. What
So
about?
poetry, so we can move over to but maybe before we move over to poetry,
Sure.
in the world of business still,
Yes.
the educator, psychologist, and teacher Parker Palmer is a very little book, a very beautiful book. Let Your Life Speak: Listening for the Voice of Vocation. In this book, he speaks as like as an educator, and he'll say things like, I was finally able to say yes to life, a choice for which I'm grateful beyond measure, though how I found yes remains a mystery to me. At one fork in the long road back to wholeness, when I was in fact walking along the country road past a freshly plowed field, I found a poem, and I offer it. And from the depths of a depression, I now share our vocation of leadership in the world of action. So he talks about leadership, but he talks about leadership from the spiritual and psychological principles that enable us to not respond and act out of fear, out of anger, out of coercion, but rather out of wholeness and healing in life. It's a little book. It's a beautiful, beautifully written book. He's written many things, but this particular one, Let Your Life Speak: Listening for the Voice of Vocation, I highly recommend.
So that little book is little, but it definitely packs it packs the whole punch.
Yeah, it takes a long time to read.
So on to poetry then.
Poetry.
Okay. Because to me, when I was reading your books, because like I said, I did read Dance of the Dolphin in 2006, and I just got through, I think last month or the month before that, The Bridge to Forgiveness and God Whispers, and then I literally just finished Amen like yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
but Amen was more of your own personal poetry. What I was getting from it was like a type of response to the prayers, because I think, and it's not on right now, but because I have it on ebook. But on one of them, I know that you mentioned, I think there's something called the 7, what is it? The 7 Psalms that are stated every day. And I think
Right.
what I was getting from that was your own personal response to that.
Right. Right. Amen was a digging deep of spiritual and liturgical poetry and prayer that can express some of the joy, the anguish, the fear, the pondering, the wonderings, the creative spirit of the heart.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's a book of poetry, very much influenced by all the poetry that I read. So again, the reading is very, very eclectic. I don't know in what order to go into. I
Doesn't matter.
pulled a book when I was looking off my shelf, a really old book from Adrian Rich, Diving into the Wreck. This
You
was written
mentioned
in the
that.
70s. And the reason why I pulled this book is because I think as I was coming to age in the 70s, the whole idea of a woman's voice, giving voice to a different realm of experience, and to helping us understand feminism was really, really important. And Adrian Rich was key among those writers who captured the female experience. But to skip a lot, actually, this book is by my reading chair, which is actually sitting right behind me. I read it almost every day, a poem, and it's called it's A Year with Hafiz. Now he is a Persian author of the early centuries, probably 14th century. And his work, this translation of it is absolutely fantastic. Daniel Ladinsky is a brilliant translator. I've read many of his translations. And the book is written by days, so it's very easy to read. I don't go in order. I let the poem find me. I'm a real believer that if you create space and time, what needs to be read will find you. So this little blue chair behind me here with, you can see my grandmother's typewriter in the corner, of which she wrote poetry and plays at the beginning of the 20th century. I'll sit on my chair and I'll look out the window and I'll pull a volume, often this book, sometimes other books, and I'll open to it. Okay. And here I found something that I've gone to many times, because you can see I marked it
Yeah.
with my color pencils. And though it says September 4th, September 1st, to me, it really speaks to me. Love creates a synchronicity with what love loves. Love creates a synchronicity with what love loves. Why wouldn't it do that? Knowing harmony's vital role. The calm heart's reach is vast and lasting. Bring yourself again in the presence of someone who knows God, for more inheritance is there for you. So it's, for some reason, that found me today, and it would be something that I would sit and, just having read a few of those lines, or maybe one line, or maybe one word,
Yeah.
I would sit in my chair and I would contemplate, why did you find me? What does that mean to me? So he's a brilliant, doesn't always speak about God, but he's a brilliant writer of the human spirit. Running around the centuries again, Rilke is, of course, let's see, I have another one of Rilke's books here.
Rilke.
Well, I have several, I have all of his books pretty much, but this is a nice collection, which is the Book of Hours.
That one I don't think I've heard of. I have this collection of Letters to a Young Poet and the possibility. I have the other one, The
There it is.
Possibility of Being.
So the Book of Hours is really a beautiful, beautiful book. What's nice about this book, not that I know German, but it does have German on one side and English on the other. So if you were wondering about the translation, if you went to a friend who understood German, you could actually discuss the translation.
I have a dear friend that I've known since middle school. Her family is half German, half Mexican, and then she oh my goodness, how many years ago was it? She was actually in Germany for a year. She was like well, the word governess I think is out the window, but she was basically like a family, like a private tutor, I guess, to these children of this couple. She was there for an entire year in Germany, and she would send me letters from across the Atlantic, and it was a wonderful experience for her. But yeah, and
Well,
she
wouldn't that be fun to actually open it up and see if it's something that she recognizes?
yeah,
Here, I just opened to
absolutely.
this one. I know that nothing has ever been real without my beholding it. Isn't
Mm,
that a great line?
that's
I know
beautiful.
that nothing has ever been real without my beholding it.
Nice. That's beautiful.
So I have Rilke. Of course, Mary Oliver has gotten very popular. I have all of Mary Oliver's books, but this one is a nice, new and selected is a really nice, you can see how many things I have
I that
marked
became
down.
that has become a bad habit for me because because I have library books. I don't want to bend the pages, so I depend on those little plastic I depend on these little plastic flags all the time just to make sure that I'm
Well,
marking. Yeah.
let me just tell you something about marking books. This is my father's copy of Marcus Aurelius. I've since bought a new translation because this is a little bit of an archaic translation.
Hmm.
But I have in this book not only his bookmark, but also what he underlined. So I know what my father of blessed memory was thinking in his 20s.
Mm.
So I also have his book of the Rubaiyat of Omer Khayyam, which also has his markings in it.
Yes.
So ever since I realized, and my grandmother's book on Tennyson, ever, I don't know what the future of physical books are going to be with the electronic world, but it's not for me to figure out, to decide, or to prophesy.
Yeah.
But I will say that whatever books I leave behind for my children, they will know what I was thinking at different stages of my life because I've marked in my books. And so my markings become kind of a love letter to them and a legacy of my thoughts.
That's it. That is a great gift. Yeah.
Um, so in terms of poetry, this is also not a particularly new edition, but Roger Housden, Housden, he
Roger.
wrote a series of books. This one is an anthology, 110 poems of love and revelation. It's called Risking Everything. But he also has a series of the 10 poems that will change your life, the 10 poems that will the 10 poems that will, he's got a series called The 10 Poems. This is his book on 110 poems. Again, I have a lot marked in this book.
Hmm.
It is a great anthology for the person who doesn't know what book of poetry they want. It's small, so it's doable. It's only 110 poems. And it really goes anywhere from, well, it has Rilke in here. It has Marie Howe, Robert Bly. So he goes back and forth, Pablo Neruda. So he goes back and forth to Mary Oliver, different centuries, different times of T.S. Eliot. And it's really a great, great anthology for the person who's dipping their toe into poetry.
Huh. I never heard of. I have not read anything by Houston, and I've never read anything by Mary, but Mary Oliver was her name.
Mhm.
Got it.
Oh, you haven't read Mary Oliver?
Mm-mm. I don't think I have.
Okay,
No, the
so
poet,
Mary,
yeah, the ones I read are
well,
like Emily.
I just gave you a gift with Mary Oliver. She passed away recently, in old age. But she's really became popular in later years. This is the middle of a poem that she has called In Blackwater Woods. You must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. She's a brilliant, easy writer. Easy in that she's very, very accessible for people who say, oh, I can't stand poetry. I never know what they want from me. Mary Oliver's very, very easy to understand. Perhaps one of my, so I also have a genre of books on writing that I like. But I'm going to begin with this particular book, Lu Chi's Wen Fu. It was composed around the year 200 AD. I have several copies of this in different formations, some with beautiful art on it, like this is the Chinese art, and this is a great translation. The translation is by Samuel Hamill, Hamill. And what he writes is just very simple meditations on what the writer needs to know. It's a very powerful, beautiful book. I worry that my inkwell may run dry, that right words cannot be found. I want to respond to each moment's inspiration. Work with what is given, that which passes cannot be detained. Things move into shadows and vanish. Memory returns in an echo. When spring arrives, we understand why nature has reasons. Thoughts rise from the heart on breezes, and language finds its speaker. Just a very beautiful book.
That is. Wow. The Art of Writing.
On writing.
And it's Lu Chi's Wen Fu.
Yeah.
I guess Wen Fu is known as the English translation of the Art of Writing. Wen Fu.
Correct.
Got it. Were there any others that were?
Of course, there's Anne Lamont's Bird by Bird, which is a classic now, a book on writing for writers. Bird by Bird. She echoes something my father once said to me. You know, she talks about a project she needed to do, and she didn't know how to get it done. And I think it was her father said to her, just one bird at a time. It was a project on birds. And I remember very distinctly sitting in my father's porch in Maryland, where I grew up, and saying, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to write this thesis. I had to write a rabbinic thesis that was going to be over 100 pages, and had no idea how to start and where to begin. And he said, first of all, you don't have to write it for another 4 years. But second of all, you do it just like you built the house. Do you know how we built this house? I said, no, how did we build this house? And he said, brick by brick. One brick at a time. So she captured that in her famous book, Bird by Bird, when she had to write a report on birds.
And it's Lamont or Lamott?
Lamott.
Oh, O-T-T, okay.
Anne.
Got it. That's cool.
It's a classic of for writers who are looking to write. And another classic, which is, I think, a little bit older, is Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg.
Yes.
Love this book.
Yes. Yeah, I think I must have, I don't know, but for me, I think I have like maybe 10 or 12 writing resources for myself, and Writing Down the Bones is one of them. I haven't gotten to yet though. So.
Oh, it's a great book. It's actually a very easy read. Anne Lamont's book is a little bit harder read, and this is just, The Art of Writing is just inspirational. But I also have an entire shelf of writers writing about writing. Anytime a writer writes about writing, I buy it.
You wouldn't happen to have anything by Stephen King's The Writer's Craft, do you?
I do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. That's actually an interesting book, because he wrote the first half of the book, and then he was in a motorcycle accident that nearly lost his life. And he wrote the second half after the motorcycle accident. So when you read that book, you see a shift in tone and voice towards the middle of it.
Huh. Because I did have his, oh, wait, it's not working. because I did have that book from again on loan from the library, and again he's a very popular author, so it's like once those 3 weeks are up, you got to return it because someone else
Yeah.
is has it on reserve. So all right, so we kind of went over the categories of business, poetry, writers, the writer's craft. What was the other category you mentioned? I forgot.
So, people who write, who are thought thinkers,
Mhm.
philosophers, thought leaders. I have a very eclectic little group in preparing for you. I
It's
have a
okay.
very eclectic little list here that I just pulled from here into there.
Mhm.
Of course, Self-Reliance is a classic, by Emerson, which I, um, go back and back for, I even have pages from the early 70s for when I was reading it in it. Everybody knows a foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds. That's a very famous quote, but the entire quote is, with consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen, philosophers, and divines. With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. So here he's talking about the creative spirit. And the creative spirit is not the linear thinker necessarily, where I believed this today. And so I need to believe it for the rest of my life. He goes on to say in this particular quote, that he may as well concern himself with his, speak what you think now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again. And something that I like to say to my students a lot is, look, I made up the rules. I can change them.
Yes.
That ideas, particularly for the person who, is evolving, is like wearing a piece of clothing. You try it on and you like it for a while, and then you say, what was I thinking? I can't believe I
It-
actually wore those bell bottoms or those ripped jeans, and
yeah.
you
Almost like an
replace it with
impulse
the
buy.
right. Or you'll say, oh my God, that jacket was my favorite jacket. I wish I could still have that. And that's kind of what ideas are. We ought to be able, we thinkers, to be in a society of people that allow us to think through ideas and to change our minds when we grow and deepen and learn something that we had never thought about before, or to re-articulate an idea in a slightly different way.
Mhm.
John O'Donoghue, um, unfortunately died as a young man. I think he was in his, not as a young man, but as a young person. I think he was in his 50s. This book on beauty, The Invisible Embrace, Beauty, Rediscovering the True Sources of Compassion, Serenity, and Hope. It's an entire book devoted to beauty and how beauty enables us to find compassion in this world. When you're living in a world that is ugly, both physically and imagined, it's hard to find serenity, hope, and compassion. And it is a very beautiful, powerful book
Hmm.
to be read very slowly. This is interesting. So, Saki Santorelli, Santorelli, teaches at Harvard. And he teaches students that are becoming docs. And he wrote this book called Heal Thyself. And it's lessons on mindfulness in medicine. He says that in order to be a healer, you need to heal your own wounds. And so he develops the whole wounded healer philosophy. It is a beautifully written book. It's one of those books that I try to go back to every year to sort of remember what it is he talks about healing as we ourselves try to be healers. So everybody knows the book that The Body Holds Trauma, but the one
Yes.
that to me spoke more is Walking the Tiger, Healing Trauma. This is written by Peter A. Levine, Levine. I find it to be much easier to read. And it opened my mind as to, it's just marked up in every little place here. It opened up my mind as to how what is going on in our body, the way that we clench, the way our jaws clench, could be a holding on to not only traumas that we're experiencing now, but perhaps traumas that we've experienced in the past, and even perhaps generational traumas. You might notice that sometimes you look in the mirror and you see your mother's face,
Mm-hmm.
and it may be the way she holds her jaw or the way she's kind of a little bent over. And that physical attribute, according to Levine, is also the way that she has passed on, the years of trauma, maybe passed on from her mother, known or unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very eye-opening, interesting way of seeing how the body spirit connection coalesce. So, pairing that one with Santorelli together is a really interesting pair.
Huh.
No, walking, wait,
Wait, is it
yeah,
walking or
waking the
waking the
tiger.
tiger? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's more than 10, but I think we basically like get the gist that it's all categorized by the subjects that appeal to you the most to make you a better person for others,
To,
right?
I guess you could say, yeah, to inspire, to uplift the human spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. So of those 10, which one, I definitely would recommend all of them, but I mean if you were to pick one, which one would you definitely highly, especially for today's society of what's going on besides not just the book world, but what's happening currently, which one do you think would be of the most recommended if you had to
Uh,
choose?
I think I would choose a book of poetry. I know it's not the popular answer,
That
and that people have a hard time with poetry, but I
Mhm.
do feel that, Samuel Coleridge once wrote that the politicians should be poets and philosophers. And I think that if the politicians of our world were poets and philosophers, we would have a very different world.
So, are you right now taking any kind of reading challenge with your temple or the library or any other type of challenge at this moment in time?
A community reading challenge?
Something like that, or your
Yeah,
own, or like,
no, no, I'm just doing my own reading. I'm actually doing some research in a book that I'm starting to develop around the high holidays. So most of my reading right now is research based in second, third, fourth, fifth century writings.
that's cool. Not one of them happens to be what is it called? Um, I'm not sure if you. Oh, good heavens! Sorry, yikes! I'm not sure would that happen to be something of like the tapestry of Jewish life. Would that be one of them? That could
No,
be
but
a.
that's nice. Who wrote that book? I don't know that
This
book.
is Rabbi Nina Beth Carden.
Oh, I know her. She's brilliant. Yes, I do know the book. I know her work.
Yeah, this was
Sh-
given to me years ago, and I've also
Uh,
flagged again. I flagged a bunch of the holidays because I'm also writing. I've been working on this story for. I think I've been working on this story since high school, but it's just the getting finally around. I want to say that I finished the first. I want to say part one of uh of the story. So I have a whole bunch of primary sources and novels and poetry and all sorts of stuff that I'm just trying to like I said, I think I've been doing a lot more research than I actually have been doing the writing, so that takes up a lot of my time. So, speaking of reading and research, uh, I'm not sure how much you have been paying attention to what's been going on when it comes to the book world and the book bans. So, what do you think? And I've asked this question, and it's a loaded question, but what do you think is the biggest obstacle as to why we still have these book bans and why they continue to be this way and how it's affecting the clientele, the schools, the students, future generations? What do you think is what do you think is the biggest obstacle that is the cause or that we're facing because of that?
Such a complicated question.
Yeah.
I obviously am categorically, undeniably against the banning of books. Um, on the other hand, I would hate to see Mein Kampf on the bestseller list. which was the book that Hitler wrote. Um, I I think that there is a aspect of our population that is trying to control and narrow the experience of people to fit their particular ideology, and therefore are afraid of ideas that they consider corrupting, um, of an ideology that is monolithic, um, extreme Christian, white,
Yes.
um, philosophy that bans the variety of human experience. And they're afraid of the ideas because ideas can ignite the human experience.
Yeah.
Um, so the book
It's
bans are for sure dangerous in and of themselves. Tom Sawyer being banned and Huckleberry Finn being banned. And even if these books are written in a time that is against our sensibility now,
mhm,
they're a historical snapshot in time and can be taught by the talented teacher
mhm.
in its historical place.
I agree with that. Because and I was actually I'm not sure because I literally the video was posted recently. I had an interview with a former Cambridge professor, Dr. Kavita Finn, and we were talking about, you know, the books that are being banned. She said something about that. First of all, the educational system needs to change. But the second thing is, again, she doesn't believe in book banning, but there's certain things that she would not that she wouldn't touch, but yet at the same time she's saying someone needs to teach it. And I was saying in that video before I did the research that, again, like you, there is no way that I would even touch Mein Kampf. Never. But it's interesting though that I did post later when I was doing the editing that there was in 2016, I think in 2016, there was an influx of orders for this for his manifesto. However, this particular one was a critical edition. So it was I was sort of like an antithesis of what he was saying as a type of, I guess you can call it a type of object lesson in that. So
Yeah, and then periodically there's an influx of requests for the Protocols of Zion, Elders of Zion, which is an anti-Semitic book. So ideas can be very dangerous, of course, and we heard the university professors before the Congress not condemning hate and insightful speech
yeah,
because it depends on the context. So this is where it becomes, you know, a very, very complicated subject matter. But anything that incites out of bigotry and prejudice the death and genocide of a people. But those who talk about the journey of a child that is going down the river and his journey to self-discovery,
mhm.
you know,
Like,
there's a huge difference between those two things.
yeah. You mentioned something about the dangers of that. I'm not sure which book it was, either in Bridge to Forgiveness or God Whispers. You mentioned something about something not having I can't find the quote, but something to do with if an ideology is without psychology or something, then that leads to dangerous repercussions, such as what happened with Jim Jones and other cults and something of that nature. That
Right.
without the something about the something about the psyche that is missing is what causes these ideologies
Right,
to go.
right. So that, you know, we call it a spiritual bypass, that without doing your psychological work,
Mhm.
and working out the issues that we all have, some more extreme than others, and you
Yeah.
just go on the spiritual journey without being psychologically stable, and not having an equilibrium,
Mhm.
then a lot can be explained in the name of God. And we're certainly seeing that with Hamas ideology now,
Yeah.
where we're looking at the face of evil. So
Mhm.
there's no question that there's evil in this world. And the conversation with book banning should not be mixed up with evil. There is
Right.
evil, and evil should be eradicated. But the
Yes.
book banning is to create small minds towards an ideology that is very monolithic, and reflective of one particular value system and one particular group, which I, have no problem with them having that ideology, but it's not my way, not my church, not my book list.
So were there, speaking of the banned books, were there any on that particular, I'm not sure if you got a chance to look at the list at all, but were there any on that banned books that on the banned books list that that you did read?
No, I have to be
None of it?
honest, I haven't, because most of my reading is nonfiction these days,
Mhm.
and most of the books on the ban list were fiction, so.
Okay.
Though
So
I do read fiction, but as you see, I was diving into other areas here.
sure. So was there ever a read that you came across that you found very difficult to get through, either because of the content or the subject matter? Was there ever a time that happened to you?
Probably twice, but not in the terms of banning of a book. When I was a college student, when I was studying philosophy, reading Descartes really disturbed me. Um, and I found it hard to go to class. And as I got a little, maybe even before then in high school, I read um, Kazantakis, Zorba the Greek. He wrote a book called The Last Temptation of Christ. And it was such a powerful book in terms of the revelation. It's a fiction book, obviously, that at the time I found it very hard to read. It challenged my ideas. I've recently reread it, maybe in the last 7 years,
Mhm.
and don't find it difficult to read anymore. But as a young girl, I thought, as a budding woman, found it difficult because it really challenged my belief system. But I
Mhm.
read it.
Yeah,
I finished it. Took me a long time, and I finished it, and I kept it on my shelf, and I never forgot about it. And as I matured and got older, I reread it. So it's not just because maybe because it challenges you, we need to hold on to it tighter.
that's another way of thinking. Yeah, another way of looking at it.
Mhm.
So, if you were, because you are a writer and a researcher, what book could you absolutely not live without in your entire collection? If you had to, like, if you were, heaven forbid, because we live in SoCal, and we are living in the area of fire hazard country right now. I mean, for me, it would be like a truckload, but if you were to choose which book in your entire collection could you absolutely not live without?
I think I would just pull out any volume of poetry that I could grab quick enough.
So, are there any organizations or charities that well, I know that you run, what is, I've seen it in both yours and Leslie's email. What's the congregation that you are the senior rabbi of?
I'm the rabbi emerita of the congregation. I retired from congregational life a little over a year ago. It is Congregation BJBE, B'nai Jehoshua Beth Elohim.
Our prayers are with them, with the IDF and the hostages, but two of these hostages, I think
Mhm.
I don't know if they're members of your congregation or the fact that he has a friend or his daughter knows them or something.
She went to Deerfield High School.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad you pinned me down. This has been
Yeah.
so delightful to talk to you. I hope it's what you were looking for.
Yeah. I did. I didn't know if you had maybe time for one more question.
Just a short question because I have
Okay,
another.
so in one of the books, two things. In one of the books, you mentioned that you were a literature major and that you were obsessed with juxtaposition and irony and what was it, like, meaning, and that you applied
Mhm.
that. apply that to your life. I found that very unique because I never thought about it that way. The other thing was one of the things that it never occurred to me in the book Amen. You were saying before that Jews are more interested in the questions rather than the answers. And in one of them, I have it highlighted and bookmarked that question within that word is the word quest.
Correct.
That is such a different way of looking at questions, because students ask all the time, what is the point of questioning the text? And it's more of seeking what the text is actually trying to say. But my question
Correct.
for you is, what made you decide to become, because I think I read something about your site. What made you decide to become not just a rabbi, but to become a spiritual leader? If you can just maybe answer that question for me.
Yeah,
Made you decide to do that?
so the question, it's not what our teachers taught us. There's no silly question. There's no stupid question. I mean, certainly there are no stupid questions, but there are questions that are better than others.
Mhm.
And as we refine the question more and more, it sends us off on a quest, a journey of awakening and spiritual discovery.
Yeah.
I never decided to be a spiritual seeker. I just was born as a spiritual seeker. I remember as a little girl lying on my parents' front lawn as the sun was beginning to set, and just lying there for probably an hour or so, watching the sky as it turned colors, and just contemplating, just thinking. I mean, I was a little girl, but I was thinking. When I decided to be a rabbi, I was only 8 years old. There were no women rabbis, but nobody told me no. And when people asked me why I wanted to be a rabbi, 8 years old, the answer I gave was because I want to know what rabbis know. And what I meant by that as a little girl was, it seemed to me that they were in pursuit of some kind of fundamental, important knowledge. And I wanted to know that. And it kept me in the game all these years. It's still the compelling force in my life. I love entering into the mystery, which is why I think I love poetry and philosophy so much. And books on leadership is the study of human character. It propels you into the mystery. And the mystery, to me, things that don't have straight edges,
Right.
2 times 2 is 4,
Yeah.
are less interesting to me than things with fuzzy edges.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Well, Rabbi Kedar, thank you so much for taking the time to speak
You're
with me today.
welcome.
And
Thank you.
again, shalom to you and your congregation. And if you see, I'm not sure if you see Rabbi Jonathan Bayach, but he's also a friend of the family, and he's been known to be in your circle. So say hi to him for me as well.
I shall, and you'll let us know when this airs.
Awesome. I will. Thank you so much. Again,
Okay,
shalom.
take care. Stay safe.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.